Moving. That's very moving. But I want to take a quick moment and say thank you to someone who has been here faithfully with us for the last 3 years. I don't think that we could do our show each year. We'd be hard pressed. And I know that it's been a challenge this year. So I just want to say thank you to Monty Pitts for all he does behind the stage.
Absolutely. Monty is the best sound man in Vegas. Thank you, Monty. We love you.
Yes, Group W is lucky to have him. So anyway, I am going to turn the mic back over to Bill so Bill can introduce who we have coming to the stage.
Okay, today we got some pretty good guests coming up. I've got a couple guys that are associated with and have been associated with the military and the rodeo industry. And I've also got a pretty special guest out of Stevensville, Texas, Gina Graham. She's not a veteran, but her and I is going to be working programs together next year with veterans, and she trains bucking bulls for the PBR. So I'm going to start off with introducing Ronnie Arrington. He's a 20-year Marine veteran from Fort Worth, Texas. And Ronnie was in on the ground floor of bringing the military and the rodeo together to start forming associations.
Morning, Bill.
Morning,
Good
Ronnie.
morning.
Good to have you. Next person I'd like to bring up is James Hastings. He's from Alaska, like me. James is a 23-year Army veteran like myself. James works with, he is the vice president of what we call PAFRA. That's the Professional Armed Forces Rodeo Association. We just had the World Finals in Midland, Texas about a month ago, and I was down there with them, and that's how I met Ronnie, was there, and we got talking about this show, and that's why I introduced him to be my guest. And last, not least, I'd like to introduce Gina Graham. She's the young lady I was telling you about that trains the bucking bulls for PBR and stuff, and she's got a pretty interesting story she's going to share with us. And her background and stuff is one of the reasons I got a hold of her about, we're always looking for possibilities for veterans. A lot of them want to be in the rodeo industry, but they don't want to ride. So we're looking for opportunities to train them how to be announcers, stock contractors. And Gina and I got together, and she said she'd work with me, that we could bring some down, and she could train them how to train bucking bulls. So I'm going to open this up with Ronnie going back to the old days of the MRA back in 1985.
We actually started in 84. 85 was our first year that we started sanctioning rodeos. And it started because the military cowboys was having a rough time. It wasn't unusual to go to an all-military rodeo and they'd try to charge you entry fees to get into the rodeo. And there's a few rodeos where you went to, and when the pay time comes for the payout, you find out that they took half the entry fees to pay the stock contractor and things like this. And it just kind of upset me, so I started talking to some friends, and we got together, and we started the Military Rodeo Association, which was the first rodeo association. And we sanctioned several rodeos throughout the Southwest, including the Camp Pendleton, the Marine Corps Air Ground Combat Center Rodeo. We had some in Buckeye and Benson, Arizona. I believe Imperial Beach was in there. So throughout the year, we sanctioned some rodeos, and we kept points and kept track of who was doing good and who wasn't. And at the end of the year, the 29 Palms Pioneer Days, we produced that rodeo as the Military Rodeo Association National Finals. And that was the first invitational national finals that was ever held. I see Vicki has a question.
Oh, well, I do. That was in 1985, I believe I read, Ronnie?
Yes.
Okay, and that was at 29 Palms, and you had rodeo contestants from all over the world.
Yes, from as far away as Okinawa, Japan. And it was also team competition. Now, this team competition was actually started by Roy Madden, who was the base stables manager at the Marine Corps Air Ground Combat Center. And we wanted to have a rodeo club back in 83, 84, something like this. And he said, well, let's make it a team. And that way you get more base support if you call it a team. And I said, well, if we have a team, we don't compete as a team. So that year at his rodeo, he held the first team competition. And so at all of our rodeos, we actually had team competition. And at the finals, the first FSSG from Camp Pendleton won our first team competition. And Jack Ward won the all-round cowboy award. And the rest of them, I honestly don't remember, but it was a good rodeo. We had skydivers, we had Budweiser and Coors. It was the first function, and as far as I know, maybe the only function, where they co-hosted the rodeo. We had a Budweiser beer wagon on one side of the arena and a Coors beer wagon on the other side of the arena.
Well, that kept everyone happy. And of course, Jack Ward's a familiar name in the world of professional rodeo. He's a former world champion bareback rider, Cadillac Jack.
Well, I don't know if it's the same Jack Ward.
Oh, it's a different Jack Ward, okay.
I think it's a different Jack Ward. But anyway, that's who won our first all-around champion cowboy.
Well, you know, the question that I have for you is, there's a lot of sports that you guys could have picked up an association for, and you guys chose rodeo. And if I read correctly, you didn't have to be so much trained in any of them. Anyone could enter whatever they wanted to enter. What was that like back then?
It was rough, let me tell you, because most of the cowboys that started riding with no instruction whatsoever. I know at Camp Pendleton one year they have 6 weeks of practice sessions before they have their big rodeo, or used to. And I walked behind the bucking chutes one day, and all these bull riders were getting their ropes ready to ride. And the way the knot is in the rope is very critical. And I saw about 7 cowboys that had their knots in the rope tied wrong. And when they got on, that rope was just going to slip. I mean, it was just going to go zip, just like that. And so I went down the line and started trying to help these cowboys out a little bit so that they wasn't going to hurt themselves. But basically, there was no instruction. You just kind of flew by the seat of your britches.
Wild, Wild West.
Yes.
Ronnie, how did you guys get this known worldwide? Did you guys as individuals try to start putting the word out, or did you go through the base?
What we did, because Camp Pendleton had a rodeo and Marine Corps Air Ground Combat Center was having a rodeo, we got their mailing list and sent around to everybody. And then by word of mouth, it just spreads, because it started out on Marine Corps bases, and Marine Corps is a very small group of people. And by word of mouth, it just spread. And all of a sudden, we were getting members from all over the United States, even though most of our rodeos was in the Southwest at the time. But later on, like in 1986, my military demands became too much for me to be president of the Military Rodeo Association anymore. So I turned it over to some other people, and basically they kind of let it fade away, okay? And Sonny Borelli, who was he helped me a lot, okay, whenever we started the MRA. He kind of picked it up and continued with it, and they renamed it and called it the Military Rodeo Cowboys Association, the MRCA. And they went from there, and gradually it morphed into what we now call the Professional Armed Forces Rodeo Association, which James is part of, and which Bill and I went to their finals this last year. And now I'm going to try and help them expand their rodeos and get more members and things of this nature. So
I know what Ronnie's saying, what blew my mind back in those days. I was never in the MRA, but I was in Europe, and I was part of the ERCA in 83, 84, 85. I was actually on the board of directors, and the way what he was saying about us being all over the world and getting the word out there, literally, back then, West Berlin was still in East Germany. A lot of Americans didn't realize that. Everybody thought West Berlin was in West Germany, but it wasn't. Yeah, Berlin, all of Berlin was in East Germany. So I used to travel 180 kilometers from Checkpoint Alpha to Checkpoint Bravo, and we would put on rodeos in West Berlin, in a communist country. And it was huge. We had like 1,200 members all over Europe, but I never got back to the MRA, but yeah.
So here's my question, and I think I know the answer, but maybe somebody doesn't. What is the fascination, even in Europe, with rodeo? Why? I mean, is it just because it's so wild and adventurous, or what brings them to join?
for me, whenever, of course, I'd been a cowboy since I was small, okay? I just had the heart of a cowboy. I always wanted to be a cowboy. When I was 8 years old, I bought my first hat, and I bought it. My dad made me earn the money. Took me all the way to Abilene Hat Shop in Abilene, and I paid $36 for my first hat, okay? So I've been had the heart of a cowboy my whole life, okay? And, of course, I've been riding horses. I started breaking and training horses when I was 14, and I thought I could ride anything. So I thought, well, bull riding's the cheapest, okay? Because all you need is a bull rope, and basically you're good to go. So I went down and I got me a bull rope and a bag of rosin, and my first rodeo was the Palm Springs Rodeo. And I'll be truthful, I was very lucky I made it to the middle of the arena. Hey, most cowboys, the first time they get on a bull, they have to get out of the way so they can shut the chute gate. And because most people don't realize the power that a bull has. When they've opened that chute gate, that bull expands. His whole body just blows up. And then he turns and you feel all that power underneath you, between 1,400 and 2,000 pounds, just explode underneath you. And all you do is, oh my God, and you let go of the rope and you land right there in the chute. And they say that the first time that a guy gets on a bull is because he wants to conquer the unconquerable. Bull riding back in 1977 was voted the most dangerous sport in the world. And I think it's went uncontested. But they want to prove that they can conquer the unconquerable. They want to prove their manliness. They and prove to themselves that they can do things that's not supposed to be able to be done. And the second time they get on a bull is because they got all their brains kicked out the first time.
Uh-oh. Well, you know, I find it's so fascinating going back through the history and everything, and of course you starting, you know, with the Military Rodeo Association, but that brings us right over to James. James, tell us a little bit about PAFRA today. What has the Professional Military Rodeo Association grown into?
We're very fortunate, first and foremost, that it's an honor for me to have our forefathers here today, technically. He's the founder of this whole operation. It's kind of his fault that I'm here today, I guess.
Thank you.
It's Bill's fault that I'm here, but it's his fault.
You can't blame it on your boots, but you can blame it on your roots, right?
That's it. Blame it on my roots. So I'll tell you, when PAFRA began back in 2000, was the very first year. You know, we just had our 16th annual World Finals Rodeo down in Midland, Texas. And therein we had 79 contestants from, again, all over the world. We were all the way from Florida to, I think our furthest one, I guess technically east, was Florida. And as far as Rodeo, Spain, we had a cowboy come over from Spain. So my job with it, I started out 3 years ago technically now. It's been 3 with PAFRA as a circuit director for Alaska, and continue to grow and bring Alaskans into this organization. And this year we culminated again with just a great World Finals Rodeo. We got some great bulls, got some outstanding broncs, and we had some little teeny old tiny, I think they call them Coriannies. I haven't seen those before. I mean, we're used to those 800-pound Highlanders, but they were open, and I'm telling you, to see the guys and gals, some of them only see each other once a year. I mean, it's a once-a-year meeting, and you'd think they never left. They'll pick up the conversations where it ended after the second round last year. So just wonderful to see it growth. But
well, I was just going to ask, you know, what does the organization look like currently as far as sanctioned events, and how do they qualify for the? As
far as sanctioning, any event that a cowboy or cowgirl that's a member of our organization, any rodeo that they compete in, as long as they rodeo, no jackpots, no backyard roping. But if they complete in the full rodeo, we'll do the background check on it real quick and we'll sanction that for them. Because it is tough. We don't have the ability to have one common local rodeo area. And we don't put on a rodeo a month in the season. We literally put on a World Finals. So we have to depend on them to hone their skills and qualify. We have gone back to the last 2 years of basically an invitational. We dropped out the qualifiers because we just didn't have the time. And the operational tempo of our military over this time period has had a great effect on that too. The military has stepped back in most cases from the old days when they did sanction rodeo and hosted rodeo, because, you know, you can get hurt on a bull, but you're not going to get hurt falling out of an airplane. So they're going to break us. They're going to break us ourselves, not let us do it.
And that goes kind of what James is talking about with getting the military out there and stuff. Kind of goes back to what I was trying to hit on with Ronnie about how do you get the word out. And James and I have been talking about this, and that is one of our biggest problems. Prime example, again, is when I was in Europe. I didn't even know the ERCA existed when I hit the ground in Europe. I was going down the Autobahn one day towards Frankfurt, and here's Heidelberg, it says rodeo. And it just blew me away. I thought, rodeo's in Europe, in Germany? And so I drove in there and checked it out and joined the association and rodeoed for the next 3 years in Europe. But the big thing is trying to get the word out there, finding sponsors, and James is probably one of the best I've ever met at doing stuff like that. So I'm really looking forward to working with him this next year and trying to make PAFRA a lot bigger, a lot more rodeos than what we had in the past.
What's the mission statement for PAFRA? On the spot, I know. You're probably reforming it, changing
Somebody
it.
Facebook it.